Okay, so you're telling me you're totally swamped, right? Like drowning in to-dos, staring at that desk like it's your worst enemy.
Totally. We've all been there.
Yeah, this deep dive is all about throwing us a lifeline. David Allen's Getting Things Done, GTD. Have you heard of it?
Oh, absolutely. It's a classic.
It is for a reason. So we're going beyond just like, the typical book report here, really trying to like extract the core principles so you can actually use them.
Yeah.
Because who hasn't read a self-help book and then just like gone back to their same old habits?
Yeah, exactly.
So this is about conquering that to-do list and maybe even achieving that like elusive mind, like water state.
Oh, yeah, it is elusive.
It really is.
But that's what's so fascinating about GTD.
Mhm.
It doesn't just like throw out these productivity hacks. It really digs into how our brains are wired.
Yeah.
We are hardwired to think about all those unfinished tasks, those open loops, as Alan calls them, which can feel like, I don't know, like a million browser tabs open in your brain,
Yeah.
constantly draining your mental energy.
Ugh, too relatable. Like my brain is just stuck on refresh, constantly cycling through all those unfinished to-dos.
Yes, exactly. And that's where GTD comes in, right?
Yeah.
Gives you this clear framework
Mm.
to actually capture those open loops,
Okay.
process them, and actually get them out of your head.
Okay.
And it's not about ignoring tasks. It's just about having that system to actually deal with them, which then frees up that, precious mental RAM for actually living your life.
Right, because otherwise you're just like constantly thinking about all the things you have to do and you're not present.
Exactly.
Okay, so capture and process. Those are two of Alan's 5 key stages, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just about making lists, it's about deciding what to do with those lists.
Exactly.
What are the other stages and how do they all kind of fit together?
Okay, so the 5 stages are collect, process, organize, review, and do.
Okay.
And even that first one, collect, is a lot more powerful than it sounds. It's about having like a designated inbox or multiple inboxes for all your stuff.
Uh-huh.
And I don't just mean email.
Okay.
Think like physical inboxes, notebooks, apps, even voice memos, anything to catch those open loops before they spiral out of control.
Oh, that's a good idea, like a mental sweep net for those to-dos that keep buzzing around.
Exactly.
So once you've like captured everything, how do you actually process it all? That just seems so daunting.
Yeah, right. Just dumping everything into inboxes isn't enough.
Right.
That's where process comes in. Okay, you have to look at each item and ask yourself, is this actionable?
Okay.
And if it's not, you can just toss it, delegate it, or maybe file it away for later.
Mm-hmm.
But if it is actionable, you define the very next physical action you need to take.
Oh, okay. I'm already feeling a bit calmer. But I think people often get tripped up on defining that next action.
Yeah,
So can you give us an example of what that actually looks like?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's say you have planned vacation on your to-do list, which we probably all do.
Always.
It's so vague that your brain doesn't really know where to begin, so it just keeps, stressing about it.
Right.
But if you break it down and define that very next physical action, like search for flights to Italy,
Yeah.
suddenly it feels a lot more manageable,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because you know what to do.
It's like your brain needs that specific actionable instruction to shift from like, ugh, I should, to, okay, I'm doing this.
Yes,
That's so key.
it is key. It's about moving from that sense of overwhelm to a concrete plan, which can be so empowering.
Yeah.
And that's what's so brilliant about GTD. It gives you that structure for making those decisions and actually taking action.
So we've collected our to-dos, we've processed them down to those next actions. What's next? How does organize fit into this whole system?
Well, that's where things get really interesting and where you can start to tailor GTD to your own work style. You see, Alan, he's not a fan of the traditional daily to-do list. He says those become way too overwhelming and often really unrealistic. Instead, he recommends something called a next actions list.
Okay, I admit I'm a sucker for a good list.
Oh, yeah.
But even I have to agree, those daily to-dos can quickly spiral out of control.
Yeah, for sure.
So how is a next actions list different?
Okay, so instead of it just being like a brain dump of everything you need to do,
Right.
a next actions list is organized by context.
Okay.
So you might have a list for at home, a list for at work, a list for errands, and so on.
Ah, okay, so it's like having a personalized game plan for each situation.
Exactly.
That makes so much more sense than trying to tackle work tasks while I'm also mentally planning dinner and trying to remember to call the plumber.
Exactly. And this is where understanding the context part of next actions is so crucial because it's about recognizing that certain tasks They're just better suited for certain environments or even just like certain energy levels.
This is making so much sense. So, like, instead of clean the entire house going on my to-do list, which honestly just makes me want to crawl back into bed,
Oh, yeah.
I'd have a next actions list for at home with those smaller tasks like load the dishwasher or fold that laundry basket that's been staring at me for 3 days. You know the one?
Oh, yeah, I know the one. That's exactly it. You're breaking those big, overwhelming things down into manageable chunks and then putting them in that right context.
Yeah.
And these next actions lists, they're not static. They're dynamic. You're constantly adding to them, checking things off, rearranging them based on your priorities, your time.
Right, okay. So how do you actually decide what to tackle first? Because I can imagine myself, even with all of these like nice, organized lists, I'm still like paralyzed by indecision.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And that's where the do stage comes in. And I think this is where the kind of magic of GTD happens.
Okay.
Alan gives this really helpful framework for making those decisions in the moment. He calls it the 4 criteria model for choosing actions in the moment. And it takes into account your context, available time, energy levels, and priorities.
Okay, let's break that down. So context, we've already talked about, like, I'm not going to tackle my grocery shopping list while I'm at my desk.
Right, exactly.
But what about, like, available time and energy levels?
Yeah, so think of it this way. You have a 15-minute break between meetings. Are you going to start some complex work project that requires, like, intense focus?
Probably not.
Probably not, right?
Yeah.
But it might be the perfect time to knock out, a few quick emails from your at-computer next actions list.
Or finally book that doctor's appointment,
Yes.
that I've been putting off. Yes, that totally resonates. And then how does priority factor in?
This is where you really have to connect with, like, your big picture goals and your values.
Right.
Like, what's really important to you. What projects or tasks, even if they're small, are going to move you closer to those big aspirations.
Okay.
Those are the ones that you really want to prioritize.
So it's not just about getting things done for the sake of being productive. It's about being intentional with your time and energy, making sure that your actions are actually aligned with what really matters to you.
Yes, 100%.
Not just checking things off a list.
No, exactly. And that actually brings us to, I think, a really important stage of GTD that often gets overlooked.
Okay.
And that's the review.
Right.
Yeah.
Because what's the point of all this capturing, processing, and organizing if you're not like regularly checking in with your system, right?
Precisely. And Alan, he recommends a weekly review,
Okay.
a sacred time to go through your inboxes,
Mhm.
update your lists, clear those mental decks, and just make sure that nothing has fallen through the cracks.
It's like hitting that like refresh button on your entire system,
Exactly.
ensuring that it's still serving you and not the other way around. I've definitely had those moments where like I set up a fancy new planner or like some new app, and then a few weeks later it's just like back to chaos.
Oh, yeah,
So the weekly review sounds like the kind of antidote to that.
absolutely.
The weekly review, it does sound like a game changer. Like having that friend who gently reminds you to clean your closet, before it becomes a total disaster zone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't wait a year to clean out your closet, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to let all those tasks just pile up in your mental space for too long either. So the weekly review helps you stay on top of everything. Make sure that your system is always like working for you, not against you.
Totally. So we've covered those 5 key stages of GTD, right? Collect, process, organize, review, and do.
Yes.
But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about those bigger projects, that often feel the most overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
How does GTD help us tackle those, like, without getting totally lost in the weeds?
Well, that's where Alan's 5-phase planning model comes in. It's called natural planning. And it basically just mirrors the way our brains naturally process complex projects.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for us. What are those 5 phases?
So the first phase is purpose.
Okay.
It's about getting like crystal clear on why you're taking on this project in the first place. What outcomes do you want? How's it going to contribute to those big picture goals? This step is crucial because it gives you like a guiding star. Especially when things get tough, you can come back to it.
Yeah, reminding yourself of the why can be so motivating, especially when you're like knee deep in the how.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then comes the vision phase. And this is where you can kind of let your imagination run wild.
Here.
What does success even look like for this project, right?
Yeah.
What are the potential obstacles and how could you overcome them?
So it's like brainstorming, but with a focus on that, like end goal.
Exactly. You can even get visual here. Some people like to create mind maps or vision boards, whatever helps really solidify that outcome in your mind.
This is resonating. I've definitely found that when I have that clear vision of what I'm working towards, it's like those steps to get there just seem to like flow more easily.
That's the power of it. So once you've got that clear vision, then you move into the brainstorming phase. And this is where you're just generating as many ideas as possible. No judgment, just getting it all out there.
I love that there's a designated space for no bad ideas because I think so often we kind of like we censor ourselves too early in the process.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then, once you've got that good brainstorming session under your belt, you move into the organizing phase, right?
Right.
That's where you start to group those similar ideas together,
Mhm.
identify any roadblocks, and prioritize those next actions.
So it's like taking that like chaotic burst of creativity from the brainstorming and like channeling it into a more manageable plan.
Yes, precisely. And then this leads perfectly into that final phase, which, you guessed it, is next actions.
Okay. It all comes back around.
Exactly. You take those bigger project goals and you break them down into those bite-sized, actionable steps that we talked about earlier.
I love it. So for our listener who's feeling inspired to dive into GTD, what's one key takeaway they can start experimenting with, like today?
I would just say start small. Choose one area of your life that's causing you stress. Maybe it's an overflowing inbox or a chaotic to-do list, or maybe just like one project that feels stuck.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, apply those principles we've been talking about. Capture those open loops, define your next actions, and really try to commit to that weekly review. I think you'll be surprised by how much calmer and more in control you feel, even with just those small changes.
It's about taking that first step, building that momentum, and like discovering what works best for you. Remember, GTD, it's not about achieving like perfect productivity.
No.
It's about creating a system that supports your goals, reduces your stress, and frees up your mental energy to really focus on what matters.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe you'll even achieve that coveted mind water state along the way.
I hope so. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into getting things done. Until next time, happy organizing.